Howdy everyone, it's Sam. I hope you're all doing really well. If you're new around here, hope I can get you to consider liking the content and subscribing to the channel. And if you are a regular around these here parts, thank you very much for the continuous support. I have with me the founder of Ladies Who League, Miss Mary Constantopoulos. Her website and everything else that you'd like to go check her out on, there are links in the description box below. Please go and check out all of her work. She is absolutely sensational, and I'm very, very grateful that she's here with me this evening. Mary, how are you? How are you?
Sam, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me and for the great work that you do. And can I just say thank you for pronouncing my last name right? We are off to a very good start.
A decent start. A decent start, Mary. So just would you like to tell everybody why the Parramatta Eels are the best club in the National Rugby League?
Well, that's going to be the whole show, isn't it? I'm just going to talk about the Parramatta Eels for an hour because that's what I'm sure all your listeners and your viewers want to hear about. Yes. But like most women my vintage, the reason that I got into rugby league in the first place was because I wanted to spend more time with my dad on the weekends, and he watched a lot of footy, so I started watching footy too. We are a one-team household. Not really sure where these households come from, where someone supports one team and someone supports the other. Everyone in the Constantopoulos household supports the Parramatta Eels, and if you wanted to try another team, you probably weren't going to get dinner that night. So I've been a pretty loyal fan since 1998. My first favourite player was Clinton Schifofsky, and we had a pretty rough end to the season in 1998, but I feel like that set me up really, really well for what's to come. I've experienced plenty of heartbreak along the way, but plenty of really good times as well.
It's a completely different setup to my family, how we all grew up. My dad supported the Wests. My mum supported Penrith. I support North Queensland. My sister went for Melbourne, and my brother went for the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. So it was civil war every freaking weekend, just about, Mary. But we love rugby league. So I want to get stuck straight into the topic at hand. And usually I like to have a bit of a goofy joke at the start of every stream that I do, Mary. But this situation, this topic is beyond one. It has gone beyond one. So where do I start? I'm going to go straight back to 2020, Mary. And if we all recall, and even though we don't want to because 2020 was a very difficult year, the National Rugby League went into lockdown. The players had to take pay cuts, approximately 6 to 8% of a pay cut, and they were left in the dark for a couple of months. Peter V'landys, the still ARLC chairman, fast-tracked the National Rugby League to come back in the month of May. And for that, look, we can't ever forget that, and I guess we'll always be grateful for that. But Mary, with what Peter V'landys did back in 2020, does that give him a free pass for something that he may bugger up on in the years to come?
It's a great question, Sam. And I suppose for me, it's very much about leadership style. So you're absolutely right. Peter V'landys did an exceptional job back in 2020. All sports survived that period, but the NRL was the first sport to come back. I don't know Peter V'landys personally, but my observation of him is he's a very tough character. He's extremely well connected, not just in Sydney, but across Australia. And I feel like he has sort of a bulldozer style, which is potentially why he was able to push and push and push and put the NRL in a position where it was able to come back first when it came to the men's competition. Unfortunately, I don't know if that bulldozer style has worked as effectively since then. And we've seen some real challenges for the NRL over the last couple of years. So this CBA is absolutely one where the approach of bulldozing certainly hasn't worked. And I'm sure we'll talk about what happened just before Christmas with the announcement the NRL made. But additionally, we've seen real challenges when it comes to rule changes as well, and the way that they've been brought in, socialised, not really communicated with the players. So I'm a big believer in different leadership styles for different times and for different points of an organisation's life. And I'm just not sure how effective that bulldozer style of leadership is anymore.
Following on from that, in 2020, the NRLW side, the New Zealand Warriors, had to be scrapped because they could not sustain to participate in the following 2021 NRLW season. So there was unfortunately a massive loss that the rugby league did suffer. And New Zealand Rugby League is suffering as well at the moment, in my opinion. But that's a different topic for another night. And so in 2021, we had crowds back at full strength towards the back end of the year, or at least half strength anyway. And then in 2022, that was it. The gates were going to be open up for rugby league fans through and through. And this is something that happened in February of 2022, Mary. And I'm going to throw this image up here. In February of 2022, the NRL announced that they had made 37% profit on top of revenue, on top of the 2021 efforts, making it $155.4 million better than the year previously. And so Peter V'landys, and as you touched on just a moment before, Mary, Peter V'landys did state that they're as financially safe as they had ever been, or at least in quite some time anyway. Now, that happened a few months after the Rugby League Players Association put forward a CBA in October of 2021. So while it was all well and good to say, yeah, we're making money, and as you may have just read there, that we're putting money back into the players' pockets, they've all been reimbursed after taking a pay cut back in 2020. The players put forward a CBA with a deadline of it being in October of 2022. We're now a few months past that point, and we're a couple of weeks away from the NRL All-Stars fixture from lighting up our screens. And look, I am looking forward to it, but there is a severe level of danger involved in this NRL All-Stars clash, Mary. And I don't think that Peter V'landys and Andrew Abdo, to get to the real crux of it all, man, sorry to call you man, that's just a force of habit. But to get to the crux of it all, they have not respected the players, and they have not respected the Rugby League Players Association, Peter V'landys, Andrew Abdo, and everybody else that is on that board, because for it to now be 15 months into the future and the players are still being left in the dark, I think it should be. I think they should be condemned for it.
Sam, you've really picked a topic that gets me pretty fired up, and this is something that I'm pretty angry about. And I'm particularly angry when it comes to the female side of the game, and we will absolutely get onto that. But I suppose what I want to let people listening and watching know, from a legal background, and people know how to read contracts, right? The CBA had an expiry date of 1 November 2022. That date wasn't a surprise to either party negotiating. It didn't just come out of the blue. So to be at a point now where we are almost 3 months after the expiration of that agreement, I find really problematic. And in reality, I think the minute that they sign this next CBA, they should be working towards the next one, because it is a really important document that governs the safety, the payment, and the protection of our players. And as we know, without players, we do not have a game. Full stop. We just don't.
Yep. And when that deadline of November 2022 rolled about, players were still left in the dark, and then out of absolutely frigging nowhere, Mary, on the 23rd of December, the NRL came out and said, "Oi, men's side of the competition, you're going to get a $2.5 million increase, chucking it up to $12.1 million salary cap in 2023 and beyond. And for the women's side of things, they had a $534,000 increase, which makes their salary cap for 2023 $884,000. Keep in mind still, the CBA has not been done yet. It was requested over a year ago now. And this is nothing more than, for maybe lack of a better term, a smoke screen to make sure that the players stop talking about this CBA. Well, sorry, guys, it's completely backfired on you. And the Rugby League Players Association and all the players involved in that, they've gone completely teal over the past few months. What was your reaction to seeing, Mary, what was your reaction to seeing the National Rugby League come out of nowhere, knowing now that they did not talk to anybody? They did not talk to the players about this increased salary cap that came on the 23rd of December.
Sam, the reason that I'm smiling like an idiot is because I remember back to the 23rd of December. Now, you touched on COVID. It's still a presence in all our lives.
Yeah.
I was pretty tired towards the end of last year, Sam. I live life to the limit. And by the time the 23rd comes, I am crawling towards a finish line, trying desperately to finish off my Christmas shopping. Friends of mine at work have already gone on break. I feel like a lot of journalists would have either A, had enough by that point, or B, been on holiday. So I wonder whether it wasn't very, very, very sneaky to make the announcement on the 23rd of December just before Christmas, knowing potentially that it might not get the media attention it would have received had they announced it at the start of December or the end of November. And then very quickly afterwards, we saw the RLPA come out with a statement saying that there was no agreed CBA and they were unsure as to why the NRL was releasing those figures.
And if we look into the revenue now, so this is one of the components to the CBA that the players put forward. So I'll throw up an overlay here. A fair share of revenue. Why? Because players, clubs, and states generate the money for the game. Fair enough. It is reasonable for players to have a fair share and generate more money. They should get the fair share. That share isn't just going into salaries. Players want it to fund new programs and benefits that will support current, future, and past players. And before I get you to touch on that, I want to show you a clip, and I'd like to ask you a question at the end of the clip, Mary. Okay, so in 3, 2, 1, this will take a minute, guys. Back in a minute.
There's a lot of misinformation in that. Again, when you're pushing out salary cap numbers of that kind, they were comparing it to COVID, reduced salaries, which is misleading. The top 30 salary cap was meant to be 10 million in 2022. So the jump to 11.45, which was the NRL's announcement, is only 14.5% increase. The NRL's revenues have gone up by 25.2% increase. So what players are asking for is to track in line with the NRL's revenue increases, which I think is pretty fair, you know, particularly given the fact that they're the ones that play and promote the game and they're taking on all the risks. But the devil is always in the detail, because inside that 25% increase that is being pushed out, there are a number of costs that weren't included in the last CBA that are now included in this one, such as private health insurance, tertiary education allowances, match fees that used to sit outside the top 30 for those players. So again,
I asked the question to you now, Mary, and I hope you got all that, but I ask you the question now, Mary, with the NRL making over 25 or just a touch over 25% increase in revenue and the players having a 14% increase in their salary cap, is that a justifiable margin for you, in your opinion, just speaking on the men's side of the draw, Mary?
It's a really interesting question, Sam. Now, I don't like the term not-for-profit organisation, because all organisations do need to make a profit, even ones that are for purpose. So I'm going to use the phrase for purpose organisation, which is exactly what the NRL is. The NRL is not there to generate millions and millions and millions of dollars of profit. It's, of course, entirely appropriate for them to have a rainy day fund and to be stashing money away. But given all the cost cutting we've seen the NRL do recently, given the number of staff layoffs and the really good people that have left the organisation, given the gutting of the NRL media arm, the idea that, you know, the NRL is generating all these profits, well, at what cost is the first question that I would ask. And second of all, given it is a for-purpose organisation, that money should be being invested back into the game, whether it's through our male players, our NRLW players, grassroots, or a combination of all of the above. I don't want to hear the NRL talking about millions and million dollars worth of revenue. They are a for-purpose organisation, and that money should be going back into the game. particularly, so I'm getting all fired up now, particularly when you hear Clint Newton talk about the numbers and how, I mean, it's funny, numbers and statistics can almost show you anything, but it's not just about the increase in the salary cap number, it's what's gone into that increase and what's making it up now.
Yeah. Yes. So this is the bee in my bonnet, and this is going to be the thick of it all. I see that the reaction by the players to the increase in the salary cap was $12.1 million. That is way more than we were anticipating. And we don't necessarily want that increase in the salary cap. In my opinion, the NRL men's draw, they don't need the increase in that salary cap. So for the National Rugby League to then come out and use that as a smokescreen for not talking about the CBA at all, why was that money then not put in to the NRLW salary cap, where to me, it feels like they tried everything in their power to not put that at $1 million salary cap. Why do I think it should be at $1 million, or why it should have been announced that $1 million should have been the salary cap on the 23rd of December? Because I listened to a podcast by Sam Squires, and she did an interview with Katie Brown. And this is a number, and this is a fact that I have not heard enough about. And I don't know if you've heard about this too, Mary, but at the moment, there is a 30% attrition rate in the NRLW. There are players that are seeing what's going on over in New Zealand women's rugby, and they are absolutely destroying it over there in New Zealand women's rugby. They have the policies in place. They have proper contracts, albeit $45,000 a year. It's still something, whereas we've got players like Emma Tonagato, Tamika Upton, Millie Boyle, that are playing for pittance at the moment and playing in the dark. So when I see that the National Rugby League come out and show this massive amount of money, and it's not really warranted. It's not what we wanted to see. It's not what anybody really wanted to see. And I don't think the NRL men's salary cap needed to be pumped up any more than what it was. I think the NRLW needed to be injected with a whole lot more of cash flow. Mary, what was your opinion on the increase in the National Rugby League women's salary cap?
Sam, you're singing from my song sheet. So how to say this kindly? Sam, you support the North Queensland Cowboys, and they are one of the 4 new teams entering the NRLW. I am thrilled for North Queensland Cowboys fans. I think it's a perfect expansion team because that team will represent a new area and mean that women from North Queensland will no longer have to travel as far to play their rugby league dream. I want the NRLW to expand, but I have a really, really big problem with the NRL fast tracking the expansion of the competition without having the basic building blocks in place to ensure that these women are not living in financial insecurity just because we like to watch them play rugby league. It is completely inappropriate, particularly when you think about what those building blocks are. Pay is, of course, extremely important. We have players that are waking up at 4 a.m. to go to training or to do their first shift at work or to look after children, doing a full day's work and then going to training, or having to relocate to other states to compete in the NRLW. Or when we're talking about the Australian Jillaroos, 2 weeks out from going out to the Rugby League World Cup last year, they had no idea what they were going to be paid. How are people meant to make decisions about going away for a month when they do not know how much they're going to be paid, when they are giving up paid employment at home to go and represent their country? So pay is really important. Private health insurance. Without a CBA in place, and let me just take a step back, for the women, the reason why they are in a more precarious position is because they are only allowed to sign year-long contracts. So now every single player in the NRLW is off contract. So if one of those players gets injured playing All-Stars, potentially that could put them in a really precarious position, because it also may mean they won't be able to work. Pregnancy policy. How is it that Cricket Australia and Netball Australia both have these policies, and we haven't heard a peep out of the NRL about what that might look like, particularly when there are several examples of players becoming pregnant? Sam Brebner returned last year, and unfortunately she's just announced her retirement, but she returned after the birth of her second child. And Corbin Baxter, big congrats to Corbin, who gave birth to her child last week. How do we not have these policies in place? And then additionally, Sam, we've got 4 new teams coming in who will be slightly challenged because they're starting from, they're starting fresh. The other teams will have already had players through their systems. We don't know when the NRLW is going to start. We don't know how long the season's going to be. And we've just had a Rugby League World Cup where I would have hoped that the NRLW teams would have been looking at overseas talent and thinking of bringing them over. But at the moment, they simply can't, because they don't know any of that crucial information. So the conversation with, England international Amy Hardcastle would go something like this. Hey, Amy, come and play for the Newcastle Knights in the NRLW. Oh, okay, that sounds great. When does the season start? We don't know. How much will I get paid? Oh, we can't tell you that either. How long does the season go for? Oh, sorry, we can't tell you that. We can't tell you anything.
Yep.
And we are putting these clubs in really difficult positions, because don't you think the Parramatta Eels would want to come out and say, and please, I'm just throwing player names out there. I don't know who's signing anywhere, but let's just say 2 players from last year. Kennedy Charrington and Samaima Talfa are our marquee signings. Sponsors get on board. At the moment, our clubs can't make any of those decisions, and we're expecting these women to continue to, exist in financial insecurity just to play rugby league, after they've been told for the last 3 or 4 years to make sacrifices for the good of the game. Sorry, Sam, I went on for a bit there, but once I get going, I can't stop. Looks like we've lost Sam for just a moment. He must have gotten a little bit bored of my super, super long rant about the NRLW. But I guess to anyone listening or watching at the moment, that's really one of the key points that I want to get across. There's a lot of focus in NRL media, particularly about the male players. And we've seen, a lot of journalists talking about these greedy male players and, what they're wanting out of the game. This CBA is not just about the men, it's also about the women too. And the women athletes are not greedy. I wouldn't say the men are either, but just really keep that in mind when we're talking about the CBA, that this is just about the men and the women. So we shouldn't let conversations about the men completely dominate the discourse, because the women are a really, really important part of what's going on here. Sorry, Sam, I just kept going, and I just reminded everyone how important it is that when we're talking about this CBA, that we remember the women as well. It's not just about the greedy male players. This CBA covers our men and our women, and we don't want the women to get lost in the discourse.
Yeah, it's not about greed for the men as well.
No.
It's just,
No.
the NRL have just said, we're going to give you all this money. And unfortunately, there are going to be people in the media or just people out there that shine a spotlight on them and say, you see what these boys are doing? They're taking all this money. They're all just being really, really greedy. So it's a really awful situation because of how little conversation and how much transparency there has been from the likes of Peter V'landys and Andrew Abdo. And so just to quickly go on further into what you're talking about here. So I'll throw up an overlay. So we are weeks away from, as we've already said, from the NRL All Stars kicking off. If somebody gets injured in that game, heaven help them, bro, because they're not signed up. It's a really dangerous situation. And you touched on about the 4 new teams that are coming into the National Rugby League women's competition as well. At this point in time, as much as I want to go out and buy a membership, as much as I want to go out and support the girls, I don't want it to happen right now because of how much how much of a lack of certainty there is in the CBA. Yes, I'm sure they'll get it all done by the time the NRL season kicks off, but I don't know. I just it's an awful situation that the NRL have put everybody in, and we'll go on just very quickly uh, throughout some of the other points in the CBA that they've put through. In my opinion, there is one that does stick out for me though, and it is this past players program. It indicates players' careers are getting shorter, game is faster, it can all be over at any moment. We need to help the NRLW and NRLW players transition into the playing field, and then you go into the Improved Injury Hardship Fund. And that's where I start to ask, that's where I raise my eyebrow and say, look, if a player from back in 2015, for example, did his ACL, I personally don't think that that player should be entitled to a fund that could well be created in the next couple of weeks, Mary. That may be a controversial take, but I just think you've been out of the workforce, you've been out of the game for X amount of years. I don't think the National Rugby League, in my opinion, should fund somebody that has played about 7 odd years ago and really shouldn't be, not entitled, but I don't think that they should be funding their surgery. I hope that makes sense. And do you agree with that, Mary?
Yeah, so I completely hear where you're coming from, Sam, and it'll be really interesting to sort of see what the terms of that fund are. Support is absolutely available for past players through the family of league situation, the family of league organisation. But I suppose the other thing that's really important is we've come such a long way when it comes to concussion, and we've certainly seen lawsuits in other parts of the world when it comes to former players and the injuries that they've sustained to their brains. So this potentially could be a way of the NRL and the Players Association in particular thinking that through. And it may, I wonder what the terms, again, as I say, that fund might look like, and whether it's about funding surgery or whether it's about making sure that players have the education to transition appropriately. Because I think that's a key point that gets lost as well. So we see the bigger name players talking out about the CBA and about salaries. They're not necessarily talking about themselves, but when Nathan Cleary or Harry Grant or James Tedesco talks, people listen. We're talking about the players that have really short careers, the players that are on those lower contracts that are in a way more financially precarious position than, say, a player that's earning over $1 million a year.
In a way, I was hoping that they would actually come out today. That entire weekend,
Like Sam's
sorry, guys.
pause.
Look,
There you are, Sam.
Mary,
We've got you.
even though we're still live right now, what I'm going to do now, we're just going to wrap things up now. And I really appreciate your time, Mary. This connection, unfortunately, is not reliable. And for someone that has done so much in the game to promote the women's game and so much of what else that you have done, I'm very, very grateful, and I'm very, very lucky. And I'm very, very lucky that you were able to.
Oh, just in the middle, Sam, when you were saying such lovely things, can I say it's been a pleasure? Thank you so much for a really fun and interesting conversation. And I really hope that the next time that you and I chat, we have an agreed CBA and we can get really, really excited about the upcoming NRLW season, and especially when the Parramatta Eels play the North Queensland Cowboys. Looks like we've lost Sam, everyone, but that is okay. Thanks for having me. I think if Sam was still here, he would say like and subscribe to the channel and tune in again next time. Sam, did I do a good enough wrap there?
Better than me. But again, Mary, thank you so much for your time. But essentially, get the CBA done, National Rugby League. It's been over a year now. It's bollocks. The NRLW deserve so much better. We don't want to lose these players to New Zealand women's rugby. Looking forward to the All-Stars, but fair dinkum, if someone gets injured, it opens up a new can of worms. And for the NRL men's competition side of things, I hope they get what they desire. But again, Mary, thank you so much. I'm so sorry about the lack of consistency in the internet connection, but it's been a pleasure, and I hope you can join me again when I update my internet connection. Mary, thank you very much.
Thanks again, Sam. Night, everyone.
Good night, guys.